All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Silicon Valley, where we're broadcasting from Block 71, this very special event that, in conjunction with IMDA as guests, as well as Singapore Global Network, the back of the room there, Daryl, and SingaporeConnect. So co-organizers for today's special event. I'll go into more of those details in a moment, but those of you joining us online, hello. We're very excited to have you, and we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So you'll see here we have the dashboard in terms of what's happening in the room, but we also have a running sort of list, as you see, in terms of comments later on. So we'll see how all this sort of comes together. But welcome everybody here, this bright sunny day with a little bit of rain now. You know, it's getting there. It feels Singaporean. But we're here to talk about AI governance and safety. And we have some very special guests with us from IMDA. I'll tell you a little bit more about who they are if you've been away from home for a really long time and you're not sure who they are. But first of all, who am I? So I'm Jasmin Young. I've actually been in the Bay Area for over 20 years. Some of you might actually recognize me. So I'm co-founder of SingaporeConnect, a club that's been around for 20 years. It's a social network of Singaporeans in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I've actually also been a founder and CEO of certain AI companies, one of which I just exited to KKR BMC software. So that's certainly my background as well. So I'm super excited, like you guys, as practitioners here, to talk a little bit about AI innovation, governance, and different policies associated with it as we push forward. So today, we have with us IMDA, who actually is, and which actually is a government statutory board under the Ministry of Digital Information. Oh, sorry, thank you. It's Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and IMDA is the driving force behind Singapore's digital transformation efforts by building the foundations of its digital infrastructure and driving digital innovation for a vibrant digital workforce, and is a safe and inclusive digital society that can thrive in today's fast evolving digital landscape in Singapore. Wow, that's a lot of words, a lot of digital there. But I think we kind of get what they're doing, which is really cool and much needed. We'd also like to thank Block 71 for hosting today's event. Block 71, I think, is an innovative center in Singapore that has spawned many cool startups from NUS, and Singapore Global Network, which is the organized part of EDB and is bringing a lot of Singaporeans together for many different interesting topics. So why are we here? We're here because we'd like to have a conversation around AI governance, policy, and testing. IMDA would love to engage Bay Area professionals and tech leaders to understand a little bit more about our thoughts and perhaps our perspectives on how we perceive AI governance, innovation, and potential policies, especially since many of us are in startups or big companies innovating and building AI technologies. So this is also a way in which we might be able to collaborate with IMDA in forging some of these different policies and processes as well. So to begin with, we have a couple of really cool individuals, both of whom are Assistant Chief Executives, so Denise Wong as well as Chen Hui. But first in the room here, we have Denise Wong, who is Assistant Chief Executive, Data Innovation and Protection Group and Deputy Commissioner of the Personal Data Protection Commission, and Dr. Ong Chen Hui, Assistant Chief Executive, Business and Technology Group, who are speakers for today's session. So Dr. Ong is actually online. So we have Denise in the room here today. And Denise is the Assistant Chief Executive, Data Innovation and Protection Group, as I mentioned. She's actually been around in government service for a long time in many different capabilities. So today, as part of her portfolio, she oversees AI governance policy and the development of responsible AI frameworks. Prior to taking on this position, she led a team to bring legislative amendments to tackle online harms on social media and subsequently set up the Online Communications Office to regulate social media platforms. Really cool. Before the session, we talked about how she was really working on different policies to protect children, which is really cool. And she's been part of government service and the legal side, helping to create a lot of different protections for us as well to regulate against online misinformation and scams perpetrated through the telecom networks. I'll talk a little bit about Chen Hui before Denise's session. So Chen Hui is the Assistant Chief Executive for Business Technology Group at the Infocomm Media Development Authority, where she oversees the agency's efforts in developing the industry and research ecosystem around emerging technologies. She developed the AI Verify Toolkit. How many of you have heard of that before? Oh, pretty good. 1/3 of you. And Project Moonshot. Anybody? Oh, okay, 1/3 of you. For governance of AI, she also launched a national multimodal LLM R&D program that supports Sea Lion and Merlion LLM. Anybody familiar with that? Hey, not bad. Future Communications R&D program to support 6G research, Digital Trust Center to support research into trust technologies, National Quantum Safe Networks Plus program to support business access to quantum safe communications, and the 5G innovation programs to support industries in adopting 5G. Very cool. So we have two very compelling individuals, I might say as well female, which speaks a lot for women in technology, I think, in Singapore. So thank you for that. And perhaps let's begin with Denise's introduction today on what's going on with respect to policies. Denise.
Hi. She's wearing a mic. She's wearing a mic.
Let's give her a mic.
Oh, we didn't give her the mic. Yeah, give her a mic.
Okay.
That's on. That's not on.
And while we mic her up, remember I just mentioned to the folks in the room, there is a Q&A interface. So while she's speaking, you can essentially work on asking her questions. So pigeonhole.at is where you can raise your questions. And folks online, please feel free to use that interface too.
I'll put on my jacket. Now, take two. I'm going to keep this casual. You heard a long formal introduction, but really what I do is policy, AI and data policy. My colleague Chen Hui, who unfortunately can't be here today, she's more like our CTO. And we work super closely together to kind of figure out what we need to do for Singapore in terms of AI governance. And then Chen Hui so builds the products. She mentioned two products, AI Verify and Project Moonshot. Those are open source tools that we can talk about a little bit more, why we did it, what we care about. I just wanted to thank my colleagues in the room, Wan Sie, who is our Director of AI Policy, as well as Jenny and Jia Hui, who are in the room, who kind of put this together from the Singapore end, but also partners, SingaporeConnect, SGN, for putting this together. So I'm going to keep this super casual, just run you through some of Singapore's government slides, but we'll just cover some key concepts, and I think the main thing is really to hear what questions you have. And my key agenda and main purpose here is to get to know you all, see what you're interested in, and see how we can actually connect with you going forward. So this is not really meant to be a download. It's just to give you a sense of what we care about back home in the office, and what you can help us with in terms of just telling us what's on the ground, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you care about. Being out here where it's really at the tech forefront. Okay. I don't know how many of you seen this pizza. This is our National AI Strategy 2.0. We've had as Singapore National AI Strategy for a while, but there was a sort of sense that we needed to refresh it, rethink it, and figure out how to take this going forward. Okay, so my slice of the pizza is the trusted environment one. And what that means is we definitely know we want to innovate, we want to promote AI development. That's really the sort of tip of the spear. But in order to do that Singapore style, we need to do that in a way that's trusted, that is safe, that is also secure. And we don't see that trusted and the innovation as trade-offs. It's really part of the whole that will give Singapore an advantage, that will create more economic opportunity. And the AI assurance is really a bigger part of the ecosystem of AI development and AI innovation. You'll see the other bits, and there are other people working on that. We're very plugged in as well. But really, as a whole, the idea is that we have AI for the public good. Public good for our citizens, public good for our businesses, public good for our developers, and yeah, for end users of this technology as well. Next. Okay, so from that happy spiel, I jump into a risk slide. And so, as I said, I look after the bit about trusted, right? And as you would expect in any sort of policy conversation about trust, you have to figure out and identify what you care about, what you worry about. I have to say that, and I want to place this in the context of a global conversation. And maybe I backtrack a bit to say I'm not just here for this event, even though this is the best event I think of the week. But we were actually here for convening of AI safety institutes, and I don't know if you've seen that in social media or in the press. So I co-lead the Singapore AI Safety Institute together with the Digital Trust Center of NTU. NTU provides the research and engineering in AI safety work, and we as the technical agency bring in the sort of policy and strategy work that together is the Singapore AI Safety Institute. Now, in the AI safety conversations over the last year, or rather in the generative AI conversations of the last year, you know that safety, responsible AI, the implications of this technology have also been a very live conversation. It's an important one because we can't really harness the full benefits of this technology if we don't know what it means, what the implications are. The fact that it's so potentially transformative, that it's so cross-cutting, that it's so horizontal, and it democratizes access, also means that there are far-reaching, horizontal, and real implications for the ordinary man, right? So this has really taken it out of the lab and onto the streets. So from the policymaker's point of view, and from IMDA's point of view, the question is, okay, what does this mean for the Singaporean? Not just the Singaporean at home, the Singaporean overseas as well. And that brings me to the broader conversation on AI risks. Again, this is an international conversation. The convening this week was very much about what are the sort of risks that we care about, how do you test and evaluate those risks, and then how do you mitigate those risks. And that international conversation takes place on the back of governments, jurisdictions, countries, regional groupings like the EU, having that internal conversation about, okay, what does good look like? What do we care about? What do we worry about? Okay, so at its most basic, that's the kind of thing that we think about on a daily basis. The details of this maybe matter to some of you, maybe matter less to some of you, but what we wanted to just kind of give you a sense of is how the global community and also us as Singapore starting to map out that risk landscape. I'm just going to walk you through it very quickly, left to right, because I hope that this will also let you place some of the conversations that you might be hearing in the office or over the water cooler or in other conversations that you will have in the past year, in the coming year. Socioeconomic we classify as risks that really sort of hit, as the name implies, the public. It's other types of risks with the most immediate impact, right? It's the risk that you very often hear about, the chatbot hallucinating, or the lawyer who is citing cases in court that are completely fabricated, or Air Canada, having to honor something that is chatbot said about a discount when actually that discount didn't exist. Those are examples of hallucinations, as you might know, but there are also other types of socioeconomic risks that we are thinking about and care about. For example, discrimination, bias in the face of HR applications, for example, bias in the face of using AI to predict re-offending rates, right, in the criminal justice system. So because, again, this is a very cross-cutting technology, the things that you see on this map are not academic and theoretical. In each use case, the AI is being applied, particularly generative AI is being applied, there is going to be some sense of what are the potential problems, and then how do we mitigate that. So there's another sort of, the next level down, a sort of bifurcation that we think about. Risks that are inherent in the model, and then risks that occur because of use of the model. And those have a slightly different flavor, and therefore slightly different mitigations. So socioeconomic is something that we care about and we focus a lot so far. But there are other risks as you move to the right. And I think a lot of the conversations you hear in the US are actually in these buckets, which is why we thought it might be helpful to lay it out for you. So a lot of focus so far has been in the US and the UK have been on CBRN, have been on sort of national security type risks. And that obviously feeds into a broader geopolitical conversation about US and China contestation, for example. Okay. And then existential on the far right, I don't know how many of you have been part of this conversation. It's been a very active and live conversation in Silicon Valley. It's maybe less of a conversation for us, but obviously we are aware and we're plugged into some of that chat. And it's not as if we don't care about it, we do. But very often, because some of these models are not built in Singapore, the idea of can I control and can I value align the big base model is maybe a slightly less relevant a conversation, but we obviously do care about it because the AI systems as a whole will still hit the Singaporean. And maybe more importantly, there's also the idea that use of AI in weaponry, use of AI, to create weapons and all that will obviously have potentially catastrophic and existential effects for us. Okay, so I spent more time on the risk slide than I expected, but I thought it'd be helpful to kind of lay out. I won't call them risks. I mean, they are risks, but they are also just things that we care about, because you need to kind of think about this when you do the work that we do, which is kind of in the space of policy and governance. Next. Okay, so that's the backdrop. This is pretty much the buckets and archetypes of work that we do on a daily basis. And Wan Sie leads that team. You can speak to her later. Part of it, the first part is existing legislation. For those of you who are tracking this governance conversation, the EU has decided to take a different approach from us, and I'll explain that. The EU has decided that they want to put in place horizontal legislation, the EU AI Act. You might hear that discussed a fair amount. For now, we've decided that we don't think that's necessary in Singapore because we have enough existing legislation to deal with harmful outcomes. That's quite similar to the approach that the US has taken, for example, the UK as well, for now, philosophically. I keep caveating myself because this is an evolving space. We are very aware that there may come a day where we have to say something, do something, and make it mandatory. But for now, our existing laws, for example, POFMA, which deals with misinformation, our elections laws, which were recently strengthened to deal with deepfake AIs, are enough to kind of deal with the worst of the harms. And these laws are actually tech agnostic. It doesn't matter how the harm was created, but we're working very closely with sector regulators to kind of make sure that their laws are up to date and take into account the risks that we just covered in the previous slide. A lot of our work is the work that we actually do in terms of creating and building products and frameworks are in the second bucket, which is really, we're not sitting still, we're not being silent, even though we don't think legislation is necessary. So we did a model governance framework, actually 2019, 2020 is when we started this work. We've recently updated the model governance framework. Earlier this year, we launched it at the World Economic Forum, and it's a framework about what responsible AI looks like. Okay, have a read, and we can have a more detailed chat on it if you're interested. We've been looking in the space of safe and responsible practices. So in my data protection privacy hat, for example, we put out an advisory guideline about what it means to use personal data in AI systems. That didn't cover generative AI systems. It covered decision-making and recommendation systems, but we're still thinking about generative AI. We've also, and Chen Hui will talk about this a little bit more, built actual practical toolkits, AI Verify, Moonshot. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to go beyond just talking. We didn't want to just do frameworks, do practices. We wanted to actually give companies actual tools to test some of these AI systems. It's not perfect. It's an MVP. It's version like pre version, but it's open source because we also wanted people to take it, build on top of it, contribute back to the code, and then just take it into your own environments and then use it as appropriate. Okay. The third pillar is really about research. And I think if any of you are in this space, you'll know that actually this science is super nascent. And you can only engineer and build up to the state of the science. Part of the conversation of the AC network this week was about the collective ability of the network and of the global community to invest in research so that we know how to take care of the AI a bit better. How we can build the appropriate guardrails, how we can test and measure a little bit later, little bit better, and just sort of collectively advance the science of AI safety. As Singapore, we are investing fairly heavily in this. And this is, again, if you're interested in this space, another conversation that we can have, because we're also sort of trying to figure out how we can reach out to our overseas community to kind of contribute to this sort of testing and evaluation research. The last one is on international engagement. That's why we're here. Part of it is to engage with our Singaporean community, but part of it is to engage in the global norm setting. So we're very actively involved in the UN High-Level Advisory Body. Dr. He Min is our representative there. I'm involved in the OECD as one of the co-chairs of the Joint Expert Groups on AI and Data Privacy and Safety. We are also participating, obviously, in the AC network that happened this week. So there are a lot of ongoing global conversations. We participate. Why do we do it? Not just for the sake of it. We participate because we are worried about fragmenting rules of the road. We are worried that it becomes really difficult and there's a high regulatory cost to doing business in AI. And we want to make sure that everything that we do is relevant to the global community and is interoperable to the global community. Right, so next slide. Okay, so this is practical guidance and tools. This is a bit of the deep dive. Some of you know about our guidelines and tools already. I think the only thing that I will say is that they all connect to each other, right? So AI Verify is not just it's a framework and toolkit for discriminative AI. It tests certain principles. And it has both a framework, process, checklist, corporate conceptual component about responsible AI practices. So consultants use this, companies use this, and they come up and tell us, hey, we use this as a base for our own corporate policies. It's more than just a technical testing tool, but it also has that technical testing tool component. And you can see the timeline of how we work through this. It's really been an ongoing iterative process for us. Just the last bit, if you see aligning with other frameworks, again, going back to my point about interoperability, one of the things that was super important for us is that if you're a company operating in Singapore, you don't just want to comply with the Singapore jurisdictions, frameworks, and best practices. You want to make sure that when you do something, it's relevant to as many jurisdictions as you can so that you can operate in those markets as well. So we aligned and we together with the US NIST, which is the NIST in the US. We have mapped our frameworks and they are fully interoperable, acknowledged by both governments, acknowledged by both agencies, so that if you operate in Singapore or the US and you apply those frameworks, you are immediately interoperable. We did that with the ISO 42001 standard as well. We've done that with the G7 Code of Conduct. And that really sort of is the practical manifestation of our position that we are globally interoperable and that these are open frameworks. Next. Okay, moving quickly on, I already kind of touched on the different roles that we all play, and all of it connects, right? So one thing I haven't mentioned a lot about is the AI Verify Foundation. That's actually an open source foundation that holds the toolkits. And this foundation is an open source foundation that actually has about 160 companies at the moment. You can join it to have conversations about responsible AI, we have developers, we have corporates, we have companies from East and West. We have big companies, small companies, demand side companies, supply side companies, meaning people who are supplying some of these AI systems and want to do responsible AI work. We also have third-party testers. So there's a growing community of third-party technical sort of testing boutique companies, but also consultancies who are coming in. So the idea of the AI Verify Foundation is to create an entire ecosystem of responsible AI. We started this almost, I think, a year and a half ago now, and it's steadily growing. Our meetups are quite popular. It's not just a platform for us to download, it's really about the community coming together to share what they're doing in this space. So it's been quite useful. And from the macro point of view, it's been about linking the policy with the research, with the industry, so that we can create a holistic conversation. No party has all the answers on their own. Next. Okay, so I mentioned the AI Safety Institute and I got quite a few questions on it today. I guess it's hot topic because the convening just happened this week. It was convened by the US. We were in Presidio having this wonderful meeting. The storm was terrible, so we didn't get to see the bridge, but it was great. So 10 founding members, a lot of conversations, 3 tracks. Does it say this? Okay, it doesn't say this. So I'll just tell you verbally 3 tracks. The first track was on online synthetic content deepfakes. That was co-led by that was co-led by Australia and Canada. Yes. The second track was on testing and evaluation, the science of testing and evaluation, and that was actually co-led by Singapore and Japan. So we kind of drove that. The third one was on risk mitigation, risk assessment frameworks, and that was by the EU and the UK. Okay, so what is the Singapore AI Safety Institute about? I've already said some of this, but it's basically the policy, the engineering, and the research and development. And you see DTC there, that is the Digital Trust Center within NTU, again, just for reference. And there was really rich conversation. I think the USAC and the network as a whole will publish some stuff, I think, coming up, but you can also already see it on LinkedIn popping up about what the network hopes to achieve. Okay, next. Again, I've covered some of this already. This is the AI Verify Foundation. If you are interested to participate, I really encourage you to do that. Joining is free. And it's really meant to be an open source, open conversation about how you test, how you build benchmarks, how you do metrics, how you do responsible AI, how you build corporate policy and responsible AI practices within companies. We do, and I'll say in this room, we do think that there is a good chance of building a strong AI assurance ecosystem and an ecosystem of startups, boutique testing companies. We're seeing that pop up in a few jurisdictions around the world already. Singapore is definitely going to be a good Asian hub for that. So we're seeing early signs. It's very promising, and we're hoping that the foundation will be a catalyst for some of this, in order, again, for that broader goal of making sure that Singapore is well positioned to be a trusted AI hub. The very last bit, I wanted to just let you know, we're actually going to launch a new pilot in 2025, precisely to sandbox and POC some of this work. So we will have a pilot to study AI testing and assurance of Gen AI applications in particular. We're going to ask questions and invite companies to come and play in the sandbox with us to answer the questions that you see, provide use case, test. We're calling them very loosely triplets, which are basically, we're going to put together a demand-side company, we're going to put together an AI model or system provider, and then a third-party tester. And then we're going to actually work through the use case to demonstrate how actually if you apply a third-party sort of assurance lens to this, you actually get a better product, a more sellable product. And we're going to try and find this in a variety of sectors: finance, healthcare, banking, insurance. I'm just naming them randomly, but that's where a lot of this high-trust AI is required. Yeah. And the longer-term sort of idea is that we'll build out some sort of accreditation type of criteria in order to really anchor some of this work in Singapore. There are also the QR codes there, which I assume will lead us to our documents. If not, you can let us know. But we do have a lot of sort of material that's out there that we've collated, so that it will be helpful for you to connect and read more and find out more later on. Next. Okay, that's my part, Chen Hui.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise.
Hello.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Denise. That was really awesome. Very engaging. I think a lot of us were taking photos of the materials as well. I hope you remember some of these conversations because we're going to do breakouts after this, right, into different groups, and we can engage Denise a lot more. We'll have Q&A after this, so for those of you who have been wondering how to get into pigeonhole.at, the password is AIGov. Okay? All right. And up next, we have Dr. Ong Chen Hui. Are you online now? Here we have a sound coming through. Chen Hui?
Any video?
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can now.
Yeah. Go. Tell her to go. Just go ahead. Go. Just go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Morning, everyone. I'm Chen Hui. Thanks to Jasmin and Denise for introducing me. Honestly, looking at the crowd, I wish I was there to have conversations with all of you. Yeah, so my team works very closely with Denise's team to translate policy intentions into tools and programs that can grow the AI governance ecosystem, which is still very nascent. Next. Right, so Denise mentioned earlier that we wanted to build practical tools. So on the engineering end, we have published 2 open source tools thus far. We have the AI Verify Toolkit and Project Moonshot. Now, these tools basically checks the base models and applications against the risks that are highlighted in different regulatory frameworks. So the AI Verify Toolkit is for traditional AI, and Project Moonshot is for Gen AI. I saw a question in the pigeonhole about whether IMDA intends to commercialize this work or is it a public good. Just wanted to highlight that these tools are created as a public good. Now, I spent a large part of my career actually in cybersecurity research, where open source tools such as Metasploit, Snort, and many others are used widely by practitioners, and where the open source community actually contribute back to the projects to ensure that the tools keep up with the bad guys. AI is moving just as fast. And when we were building the tools, we kind of recognized that there can be no monopoly of knowledge here. So we wanted AI Verify Toolkit and Project Moonshot to be that kind of tool for AI, one that is widely used by practitioners and one where we harness the collective know-how of the community to be able to build a world where there's better and safer AI. As Denise mentioned as well, these tools are not perfect at this moment. Each of those tools essentially provides a way to interface with the AI models and applications to be tested. There's customized reporting abilities, as well as technical tests and process checklists that are needed by the reports. But we are not stopping at creating these tools for the public good. We are also working with researchers as well as international organizations, industry, and the rest of the government. On the industry front, we work very closely with the AI Verify Foundation to galvanize the industry. Some examples of the companies that we're working with are banks and insurance companies who need to stand up AI testing for, in particular, financial sector AI tests. And we're also working with some of the platform players, such as Data Robot. And in time to come, we hope to also work with the cloud platforms as well to ease access to some of these tests, as well as to scale our reach. We are also working with government, in particular the rest of the Singapore government. For example, we're working together with GovTech to create a SaaS platform that actually does testing. And the SaaS platform is called Litmus, and it uses Moonshot as a space. We are also working with other agencies such as DSTA, which is the Defense Science and Technology Agency, the Home Team, in order to actually co-opt some of the tests that they have already done and put that into the open source as well. The last group that we work with is really around international, and here is primarily around research. right? So we recognize that the state of testing sciences today is very far from where it needs to be. So many countries are actually investing in research so that we can develop a deeper understanding of the technical foundations of what makes for safe AI. So in Singapore, we are doing the same. We're funding the Digital Trust Center in NTU to do that. However, we're not limiting ourselves to just working with Singapore researchers. We want to work with researchers from other countries too. And so far, we have been working together with ML Commons, Beijing Academy of AI, and we want to add more to the list actually, so that we can collaborate across borders as well. And just now, Denise actually mentioned the international organizations that we're working with, UN, OECD, as well as the AI Safety Institutes Network. So all of these are actually very closely related to some of the international efforts. All right, I think I've been talking a lot. If we move on to the next slide. Yeah, so again, these are the QR codes of the GitHub repo. Yeah, I've prepared very few slides because I thought it's better for us to leave more time for the discussions. And so that's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Opportunity to flip through some of the reports that have been published already.
Mhm.
Very impressive work indeed. So it's very exciting to see this come and Singapore to be at the forefront. Denise, I need to talk about AC and the work there and leading all these different committees with the other countries. I think even that effort to gather countries together was something that Denise, you talked about, and something we as Singapore brokered too.
Yeah.
Perfect. So really exciting, activity here. So some of the questions that have come up, the top voted one so far includes the question on the fact that there's a lot of, while we're so forward in a lot of the initiatives we have, it's still a light touch approach. So how does IMDA envision the responsible use of AI by both service providers and end users?
So it's a good question. Agree, it's a light touch. I think deliberately so at the moment. It's a sort of a philosophical and policy choice that we're making to kind of create that kind of open environment, but also with appropriate guardrails. So I think that's the starting point. If you go and kind of deep dive into the AI Verify framework, that part is not so light. I think we've really sort of drilled down into the details of what it means to make sure that your AI system is safe in various dimensions. Is it robust enough? Is it fair enough? Is it not biased? And we've kind of guided companies through how we think you should be thinking about some of those questions. It's not mandatory, I think. So I would describe our approach as providing lots and lots of tools, lots and lots of guidance in specific areas of AI safety, but without yet turning on the switch to say this has to be mandatory. I think the other thing, as Chen Hui has mentioned, we wanted to build a lot of these tools out so that companies can take the tools and actually test their own AI systems. And so that is our approach, to provide all of these, the support, all of these guardrails, and then create that penumbra of strengthening existing laws so that we can deal with the worst of harms. Is there going to be a day where we have to legislate to make some of these best practices, transparency, disclosure, information sharing mandatory? Perhaps. I think we are monitoring that space very closely. But I think there is enough sort of comfort and confidence right now that we're in a good place, and that we want to not just govern and worry about the AI risk, because we also worry about too many missed opportunities if we tighten too much at this stage now. So misuse of AI, worrying, yes, but missed use of AI, also worrying. So that's where we've been kind of calibrating and looking for that Goldilocks.
Interesting. So one of the things I'm curious about is why? Why is Singapore involved in this? Is it because we're using it a lot, using AI a lot, or do we think that the global entities, the global enterprises are not paying, or other countries are not paying as much attention to this as we should?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Am I going to echo again?
No.
I'll just say that Chen Hui, please feel free to jump in anytime. Um, why? I think going back to the pizza and our national AI strategy, I think the first and foremost answer is we think that this is a technology worth investing in. We think that it has great transformative potential. We think there's great economic opportunity for Singapore and globally, right? So that's our starting point. But being Singapore, you know how safe our streets are? I feel that very much this week. No, I mean, San Francisco is a great place. But I think Singapore has always managed to do that balance between being forward-looking, being a place for economic opportunity and business opportunity, but also being safe and secure for its citizens, right? And so that's why I think that first and foremost, we want to make sure that we have that sort of good environment for this business opportunity to thrive. I think we've also managed to, and this is not me personally, but as a government, there was a lot of early work invested already in safety, sort of corporate support in terms of our model governance framework from 2019-2020. We also invested in a digital trust center for a while now doing AI safety research. So we found ourselves in a good position to help the global community to have some of these conversations. I think being a small and nimble country actually helps in this regard. We were able to actually quite quickly galvanize some of our sector leads, sector regulators, industry. I sometimes think of my job as pulling all the strings together and then holding them in one place. But actually all of this content was all around us in Singapore. And we do have that broader sort of support structures and systems to hold it and to run with it. This has been, more than any other digital technology I've worked with in the last few years, been a space where we've really had to take and run, build the plane as we fly it, learn by doing. That actually came up very strongly as a theme in this week's AC convening. Countries are like, you just have to take and run and try. Governments don't usually operate like that, to be honest. You know, technology has historically evolved quickly, but this one has evolved even quicker than what we've ever experienced. So we've had to have that mindset, that culture of doing, and the systems to support it. I would just call out Chen Hui here. Her team was really the ones who rolled up their sleeves, rolled up everything, and just built tools. We're willing to launch it out in the open source. It's really about an agile approach, and I think her sort of engineering team exemplified that, which kind of gave us some of these early technical gains as well, that we were then able to bring to the international table and say, here, this is what we have. It's not perfect. This is what we've done. Please feel free to use it. And we've had very good response because of that idea that we would just try, put out as a global public good, some of these sort of tools and frameworks.
That's great. I think one of the questions that have come up is, how do we also roll up our sleeves and help, right, in this initiative? You talked about all the different threads. So structurally, all the different groups and stakeholders, from the academics to the policymakers to the enterprise solution providers, how are we, where do you see the role in all these different places, and how do you drive consensus towards that?
I think, first of all, we need all of you. It's quite clear to us that number one, and manual one. The government can't do it alone. Number two, Singapore can't do it alone. And actually, number three, governments as a whole globally cannot do it alone. So from my point of view, coming out here, speaking to all of you is probably the best use and investment of my time and our collective time, because as friends of Singapore, or as Singaporeans, we really want to grow the research in this space. We want to grow the corporate ecosystem and the startup ecosystem in this space. And we want to grow sort of the engineering in this space. Like, how do we actually make better tools? How do we actually create third-party assurance frameworks? How do we think about the science and metrics and testing and evaluation of agentic systems, or multimodal systems, or systems that have robotics embedded in it? The work that we're doing right now is still largely in the space of benchmarking and red teaming, and that has been important. But we know that, especially for Gen A, and this is, I guess, a little bit more of the tech policy part of it, We know that the science of testing Gen AI systems is still very nascent. It's episodic, it's empirical. And this gentleman over here actually does a lot of interesting work. We've had a few chats on a different way to look at testing and validation of AI systems. Please feel free to chat with him. So what we're trying to do is exactly that. I mean, some of you visit in, you bring in your startups, we have chats, but it's too slow. I want to create a community, especially of Singaporeans, friends of Singapore, who are interested in this topic, who want to advance the science of it. And then we can sort of really quickly bootstrap and grow the space. So that's how we can help connect to any of us in the space of science, engineering, corporate funding. And we are at the same time also building some mechanisms to do that. You want to add anything?
Yeah, I think there are various ways in keeping involved.
It's Wan Sie at the back.
Will be useful, but we're also working with GovTech and the Smart Nation team to look into fellowships. So if anybody's interested to spend some time with us in Singapore for like 3 months to a year, I think those are opportunities where you can actually work on these areas in a much more quality and ethical way.
Perfect. Thank you, Wan Sie.
Wants to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, Chen Hui.
Yeah, I just want to echo both Denise as well as Wan Sie. Do join us. I mean, this space is growing very rapidly. There are a lot of developments, and we don't have the monopoly of knowledge here, right? So what we are keen on, be our technical advisor, be our legal advisor, give us feedback. Also co-create some of these tests together with us, whether that's in robotic systems, in agentic systems, or in multimodal systems. And I think more importantly as well, what we are also looking for is advocates, right? In the open source community, sometimes we do need to have more advocates in order to get the kind of contributions into the open source. And that is also something that we are keen to have, and we're keen to work together with all of you as well, the friends of Singapore as well as Singaporeans. And we'll dearly appreciate the advocates who can share how this space actually is and actually help us advance the cause.
Great, thank you. Anybody interested in helping?
Yes,
Yeah, so Samson.
So the question is both on like AI verified and also kind of the MGF, like the governance framework.
Yep.
So I think you mentioned that we want to build this thing, like this framework and the tool that other countries and governments can adopt, right? But then this space is also kind of getting pretty crowded. Like every country is starting to come up with its own framework, and like there are tons of libraries out there now as well for like testing and this kind of red teaming. So what is like your strategy for getting it adopted, or like why do we choose this path as opposed to like make like helping to contribute to an existing thing to make it like a universally accepted one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we started in this space very early on. I think we were building one of the first few tools. Actually, that space has changed. You're right, gotten a lot more crowded in the last year. But again, and this answers one of the other questions that we got, I think in the sort of pre-questions that we got. We're not intending to commercialize this. This is actually a public good. So we never thought and wanted or needed to be the only tool out there or even the best tool out there. But there is something, and many of you are familiar with open source tools, there is something to be said for having a sort of free product out there that completely open code, that people in other developing countries or companies that need a leg up can take and use. Chen Hui can give you a lot more details, but Moonshot, for example, is just, it's a harness. It can connect to different libraries, it can connect to different models, it can connect to different applications. And it's been a helpful process for us to build our own product, our own code base out. It's been helpful for others to take it and then adapt it to their own needs. And I think we've quite purposefully and intentionally built it to be law agnostic as well. So it doesn't necessarily plug in or to the EU AI Act only, but it can. And each jurisdiction's particular nuance or context might require some additions and some deletions, but there is also, through our policy mapping exercise, we've discovered there's actually a lot of commonality. So I wouldn't view this entirely just with a normal or usual product lens. There is a very sort of strong policy dimension to it as well. But that's not to say, and Chen Hui can speak to this, that there isn't a product lens to it. And Chen Hui spoke a bit about GovTech, integrating it into their products. And, government use in Singapore is very high. Adoption of AI is very high and is growing. So building this product out for our own use in and of itself is already good, I think, for Singapore. But we're also in talks to integrate it with platform players, cloud players. People have taken stuff from our libraries and our repos and then used it, grown it, and they've told us about it. I think there is a fair amount of use that we don't even know about. We've had other governments, I can say, who've come to us and said, okay, this makes sense, and we didn't have anything, so we used yours and then we modified it from there in all sorts of applications. So it's not meant to be the best product, but it's meant to be something that is good for us to grow. You want to add something?
Thanks.
I think one thing is that I think the intersection between policy and technical, I think that's important to recognize. There are lots of tools out there, but having a policy point of view that says this is what we think makes sense, I think it's very helpful for people who want to use these tools, so that they don't have to go and find them. So that curation is important for us.
Thank you. Chen Hui, did you have a comment?
Yeah.
I think you.
Yeah, I wanted to just illustrate what is it that Wan Sie was describing. So a lot of times when we talk about policy frameworks, they operate at the level of principles, right? And it does take some effort to translate those principles into what can actually be tested, both in terms of the technical tests that can be done, as well as some of the process checklists that may have to be put in place, right? And having that technical and policy cooperation allows, or rather, it gives some confidence to the industry that this is what the regulators are thinking about. And if we are able to answer some of these questions, if we're able to run some of these tests, it does give some clarity around what good looks like, even if that good is a temporary thing. Yeah. And I would also add that because we put the tools out there, it also has the effect of having a lot of different conversations, both within the government as well as within the industry, about how do we then stand up the capabilities, right? Because we are not driven by, how should I say? We're not driven by commercial needs. And hence, we are okay if people take parts of the open source in order to incorporate that into their own environment. And so far, we have been talking to both private as well as public sector about how to stand up central platforms for testing across all applications. Some are very much more internal looking. There are some other use cases that are essentially about how do the sector leads, for example, provide guidance out to the broader public. So yeah, so I feel that putting the tools out there, even though it's a very crowded space, but because of this collaboration together with regulators, together with the industry, and not being kind of pigeonholed into the commercial competition, it does help us actually engage the entire ecosystem about how to stand up capabilities.
Should we take a stab at the second question?
Let's do that. So I think we talked a lot about involvement across different stakeholder groups. I think one of the questions here is a nuance around standardized tests, standardized standard around accreditation and all that, right?
Yeah.
How are you moving towards that direction, and how do you bring the community together to establish these standards?
I will answer that question at the international level because I think it's an international conversation. It's very early days, but that is precisely why convenings like the one that happened this week in San Francisco is important. Because, and that also goes back to the earlier conversation we had about the intersection between tech and policy and product and policy. there is going to be a proliferation of benchmarks and tests that each company is taking, creating on their own, data sets they're creating on their own, and then testing their own products, and then self-declaring that their products are safe. That's happening in the market right now, right? OpenAI has its own way of doing it. Anthropic has its own way of doing it. Smaller labs have their own way of doing it. Everyone says it's safe. How do you compare, and how do you think about it across the board? So I think the idea of standardization or the concept of standardization everyone agrees with globally, but it's a journey to get there, and that conversation is super early on right now. When we lead the track on testing and evaluation at the AC network, that's precisely what we're trying to do, right? Jumpstart this conversation and have some sort of early alignment about how we think about testing and evaluation. And I don't mind sharing in this sort of small group that it was a difficult process even to do fairly simple joint testing together with other countries, because everyone has a different idea of how to test. And you know this, right, from working in companies, different idea of what to test. The results come back with discrepancies, and you got to figure out how people have different idea of how to report and then how to compare. So even with fairly simple benchmarks and testing, we had to have a lot of conversations with countries about what you care about, which benchmarks we agree to test on, and then how we interpret the results. So the answer is our aspiration definitely there, as a global community, as a global group of institutions looking at AI safety. But it is a journey to get there, and we are playing a very active role in trying to get to that point. There is a separate conversation, but related, about technical standards, and that's where you're thinking about your ISOs, IEEEs, because in other spaces, like whether it's aviation or healthcare or what, a lot of these are in the space of technical standards. We haven't talked about it today, but we are actually also, as IMDA, actively involved in that work stream. We've seeded some early work in Gen AI testing, but the ISO process generally takes 2 to 3 years just to get to one standard. So I think all of these tracks have to happen concurrently. But besides the convening this week, we also met with a lot of the labs and the big companies, and I think we have good relationships with them. All the other ACs were meeting them as well. So there is, I think, broad consensus that among the ACs, but also with ACs and industry, there has to be that conversation in order to reach, I would say, I use the word very loosely, standardized set of what we care about and how to test for what we care about, and then how to mitigate if we have identified any sort of gaps from that testing.
Makes sense. So thank you, Denise. I think let's just do one more question from the third there, and then we'll have closing remarks from both of you.
Okay.
So the last question is actually the third most popular one, around generative AI generating a ton of misinformation,
yes,
creating deep fakes and all that, which was on your list of AI risks, right?
Yes.
And some of this involves misinformation in terms of facts.
Yes.
And there's just this manual effort, perhaps, of needing to fact check and all that. So when you think of testing, when you think of all this fake information, what sort of thinking is there around trying to get some way in which we can regulate or manage all this fake information out there?
Maybe I'll give a broad frame, then I'm going to hand over to Chen Hui to talk more about the technical tracks of work. Chen Hui, you good with that? But I just talk about the general frame. As I said, I've spent some time working in misinformation before this. I think our solution, I would sort of broadly bucket into sort of 3 parts. One is legislative and regulatory. I think this is a space where, going back to our initial question, it's not going to be just a technical solution. So we have had POFMA for a while, and in the codes of practice, if you kind of deep dive into it, and I'm a lawyer by training, there are sort of provisions in there that require accountability for deepfakes. There was ongoing work that recently led to strengthening of our elections laws to deal with AI generated deepfakes. in the context of misinformation. So part of our solution will be legislative and regulatory. That's one. Part of the solution is going to be, I actually have a personal view on fact checking, which is that it's difficult to do, right? And I know that it's done quite by a lot of the sort of news networks and all that in the US and think tanks in the US. But I think the problem with a lot of these fake information is once it's out there and it's viral and it's distributed, fact checking is challenging, right? To then kind of bring down the temperature of that once it's out there. POFMA does have that, you know, that it doesn't take down false information. It just requires you to pin the correct information next to it. But there's some utility, but I'm not sure that utility is going to be, maximized to actually deal with the threat. I think the third strand is technical. I'll leave Chen Hui to explain some of the work we've done in it, but I would say that that is one of the tracks of work that the AC network is looking at, specifically in digital watermarking and in sort of what they call secure metadata, or sort of like content provenance tracking. And some of you will have heard of the C2PA protocols and initiative. We are involved in that. The AI Verify Foundation is involved in that, and we're tracking very actively the C2PA developments, which is really about how you create a manifest and then pull that through so that you can trace the provenance of every single piece of content that is out there. And that will incentivize accountability. And in a world where you need to penalize people for creating that, hopefully you will be able to identify who created it and what channel it was put through. Chen Hui?
Yeah. So I think there's so many different kinds of misinformation today, but fact checking will be one important tool, but it cannot possibly be the only tool.
Yeah.
So take for example, last year when I was in DEF CON, there were researchers who showed that with Gen AI, it now takes minutes and just a few dollars to create a new scan website. So it is the speed and the skill that Gen AI has enabled that make some of the manual processes today, whether that's fact checking, whether that is investigations, it kind of makes them too slow, to be effective, right? So I think in order to actually be able to combat some of this misinformation, there is making sure that we can look at the provenance of content, be able to trace it, which Denise has already mentioned just now. So it goes beyond just marking the information as AI generated. It may actually have to require us to be able to trace a provenance as the information moves from being created to actually being consumed. And I think the other part about it is also that some of this misinformation, they may not just be politically motivated. Some of them are financially motivated, targeting people, maybe the more vulnerable in our society as well. In Singapore in particular, a lot of scams do happen, right? So I think that warrants for new detection mechanisms. It also warrants for new partnerships with social media as well as distribution channels in order to be able to properly detect, mitigate, as well as investigate whether a piece of information is real or not real. And a lot of these mechanisms may actually require a technology layer in order to be able to scale to the speed that Gen AI enables.
I will add, sorry, Chen Hui. I will also add that even as we think about deepfakes as a fake image and all that, the technology is evolving very quickly. So people are now starting to worry about things like deception and persuasion of the models and its potential to create misinformation in a way that is even more insidious and indirect and hard to perceive than deepfake technology. So again, going back to the question of how we can draw you all in, if you're interested in this area, you want to research in this area, you want to devote personal time to sort of do sprints, pilot projects in this area, that's something we welcome. We are, as the AC, we are actively now putting in place frameworks to kind of draw in individuals. Wan Sie mentioned our Still working through a fellowship program where we sort of bring people in for short sprints to do work. We're interested. Voluntary time is always welcome, but we're also trying to create mechanisms to make it viable for anyone who is interested to do this work with the AC, because it's important work.
Thank you, Denise. So, Chen Hui, any other closing remarks?
Sorry, I think I might have missed the question.
Oh,
The voice is a bit muffled.
Thank you. Any closing remarks from you too? Denise was just encouraging us to participate and to contribute,
Yeah.
and that we'll continue to keep having these conversations as well to drive towards consensus, as well as challenging ourselves to evolve. And Chen Hui, anything on your end?
Yeah. So the Silicon Valley is actually one of the biggest innovation hubs. And in this respect, even as we are improving upon AI, I think it will be really good if we can actually co-opt the community around the Bay Area in order to be able to contribute, both in terms of the research that actually needs to be done, in terms of the deeper science that actually allows us to provide guarantees about the safety, and even, I guess, more broadly, to be able to work with us through the open source movement. So yeah, so I think this field is moving really very rapidly. We would really like to have more friends and advocates to go together with us.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chen Hui. And thank you all for being in the room as well as online to be part of this continuous conversation. So thank you all. All right. We're going to take a quick moment to thank all the organizers and have some process notes as we move into the next phase of our activities, which is participating, rolling our sleeves up, right? And showing them what Silicon Valley can do in terms of contributing to the mind share, right, that our policymakers here have today. So with us here, we have Jenny.
Yeah, we're gonna take a group photo. I think with those online, are they still online?
We're going to get it back online.
Oh, get them on.
Okay.
So we're gonna get a photo, maybe with those online, and then after that we'll take one physically. Yeah, and then I think we have.
Smiling. You know, guys, can we do like a fun shot? Maybe we can say thumbs up for verify.
Oh, wow.
So can we just do a thumbs? Yes, Bobby.
Oh wow. Okay, never mind. I think it's just inevitable. Some of you have the screen things.
Oh yeah, we have.
So you have something. You have the circle right in the middle for
Inside.
you.
Yeah. Okay, like this. I'm so targeted. All right, thumbs up, everybody. Okay, ready?
Oh.
Ooh. Okay, thumbs up, and 1, 2, Bobby, go.
You guys can relax.
Oh my gosh. That's the most intense part of the program.
You're asking IT people to smile. You know, we're very serious. We're talking about policy here. Deep policy. All right, thumbs up.
Okay, thank you.
How's your trip been so far?
Very intense, but good. A lot of work leading up to the convening because we were leading one of the tracks. So it was pretty crazy, but yeah, over now.
Do you intend to do more next year, like more trips?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Share with you, remember, like what's happening after this. Essentially, while they bring up the slides, I shall entertain you. There will be 4 groups of which you have been assigned. This is mine.
If you're unhappy with your group, suck it up.
Okay? No, I think the organizers are saying you can change it, but it's okay. You know why? Because you get to rotate groups. So it's not, you're not committed to that. And you're not graded by groups, so it's okay also. So basically, you're in one of the groups, and we will be rotating the groups. So group A will move to group B, and that sort of thing, right? So don't worry, you'll get to cover a bit of technical and a bit of the policy side. So we'll be able to flip, all right? There are 4 rooms. There's the brick room in the corner, which is known as room 1. How easy is that? The second room, right next to it, the smaller room, is room 2. All right.
And then there's table 3.
This big area here is 3
And table 4.
over there, okay? And then we'll tell you which groups go into each of these groups in a moment.
We'll give you the instructions in a bit, maybe after your break. But for now, I think I guess for some of us, we brought the people here, we brought the food here. Oh, it's mic'd. Yeah.
Yes.
We brought the rain here. And so if you miss Singapore and you want to come back to Singapore, or some of you want to visit Singapore to get more good food, there is ATxSummit, which is happening on the 27th and 29th. So if you're thinking of coming back and if you're around Singapore, you can come for our flagship event that IMDA is organizing. I think this is where we want to bring the government together. We want to bring enterprises and community and have conversations like what we're going to do today, yeah? And it'll be around AI, sustainability, quantum, I guess, all the important topics of today. And I think there are 4 themes that we'll be touching on at ATX as well. So next slide. So if you're interested, maybe what you can do, you can take a picture or you can register your interest, and then we'll connect with you. If you're coming back to Singapore, let us know, and we'll connect with you. Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Jenny.
that's ATX Singapore, so 27 to 29. And next, I'll pass it over to Vincent. Are you gonna tell us a little bit
So
more
Vince
about
from Block 71, he's our host here. Vince?
Vincent here from Block 71. Thank you for coming, and thank you IMDA and SingaporeConnect for doing this event here and bringing Block 71 to a wider audience. I think most of you here know us, so I'm not going to say much. We are an accelerator set up by the National University of Singapore, and we exist in 9 different cities, mostly in Asia, and this is our only flagship center in the US, and hopefully not the last one. Yeah, and what else? If you guys are starting up any enterprise, being a founder, being a startup, and looking for a space, we are a co-working space as well. So feel free to connect with us. Our contact is on the screen right now. And yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn and all that. So thank you.
Thanks, Vince.
Next is SGN,
Yes.
Daryl.
Daryl, yeah.
Thanks, Vincent. Hi everyone. Oh, okay. Is it on me?
Good spot. This is a good spot.
Okay.
Ta-da.
Am I in the camera?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Daryl from the Singapore Global Network. So we're a division within the Singapore Economic Development Board. So I'm based out of the Bay Area, and my goal here is essentially to build up what I call the 3 Fs, right? So family, friends, and fans of Singapore. So if you're looking to build your own communities where you think the synergies could meld, for me, if you'd love to know more about Singapore, I could be that bridge as well. One of my key goals is also to build out a community of like AI researchers, practitioners, founders. So please feel free to sign up to our newsletter. We have a lot of events that happen every month. So I hope to see you guys join us as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Thank you. Daryl's been a really good supporter of SingaporeConnect. Thank you. All right, now finally, but not least, SingaporeConnect.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Sin. I'm the president of SingaporeConnect. Jasmin is our co-founder. SingaporeConnect is like an overseas club for Singaporeans and also friends of Singapore and family of Singaporeans in the Bay Area. We've been doing events that I think fit around this quadrant. Sometimes I feel that the food is a little bit bigger than this proportion. We might need a little more fit, but they're always fun events, and today has very much been a very think type of event. And that I really want to thank the IMDA side very much for graciously taking up our initiative that overseas Singaporeans can do more than just show up and makan. We can actually contribute in an engaging, collaborative, discussion. So I hope the rest of today you will give your feedback generously. And thank you everyone for coming. I also like to call up Richard Chan. Richard has been our long-serving volunteer and is also the chair of our AI panel. So with this QR code, you can learn more about our ongoing series of events around AI, including this event. And also, as next year, I'd like all of you to look forward to SG60, which is also chairing our planning committee, where we're trying to put up a large-scale, like Singapore Festival Day type event. Maybe if Daryl, if SGN would be also helpfully, generously sponsoring that, I appreciate it. We will all appreciate it very much. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you the AV team. Thank you the photography and video team. And especially thank you to the IMDA folks who generously took their time. And of course to all of you for helping with this new initiative. I hope it is just the beginning of many more engaging sessions to come. So please give us your feedback generously as well after this event so we can make things just win-win for all of us here. Though, so knowing that we don't really have to always just necessarily come back to Singapore, as Denise said, to contribute to Singapore's future success. Right, thanks.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, great. Wow, that was a lot, but we'll pass you all the materials so that you guys can study it closely. Meanwhile, we want to challenge ourselves to actually contribute, right? All this like fun stuff. We've got everybody riled up, excited. We're all ready to give Singapore our thoughts. But how do we do that? So we actually have this tool called Padlet that we're going to use. Contributing to policy making. This is incredible. Would you have believed that you would be, you know, like contributing to government policy in areas that you think you actually know something about, which is so cool. Thank you for the opportunity, Denise, Wan Sie, and the IMDA team, Jenny over there, for making that possible. Okay, so there are 4 facilitators, and we're just going to take turns to run through the different topics. I'm going to stand up because I cannot be seen when I'm seated. I'm a really tiny person. I cannot be seen when I'm standing too, to be honest. But since you're seated, it helps me. We're going to start with a few things. So policy B was seated over there. We covered 2 major questions. And the first one was, just so that I can kind of like have it up in front of me, was what needs to be in AI standards, right? What needs to be in AI standards? And so this was actually a really sort of general topic, right? Because it could be anything, and some people were writing specific areas, but I think thematically, we looked at it in terms of people, in terms of stakeholders and share, you know, that folks that need to be participants and people who are using it, either using it, making it, or part of the policy making crew. So that's the whole people side. What needs to be in AI standards? The people need to be involved. Second part is the process. The process of an AI thing that's being created, that needs to be part of standard too, according to the groups, right? So how it's used, how it's tested. A lot of conversation was around how it was tested, for example, as well, and integrity and the bias for the data. And then the third thing was policies. What kind of policy should structure these interactions as we think of it, right? When you think of what goes into a policy for AI. The fourth major part is, I categorize it as parts. You know, different elements like data, security, the transparency of data, the algorithms that go into it, how do we audit it, how do we ensure it's there. So holistically, sum of parts, what needs to go into data, I put it down to 4 Ps because I teach marketing at Berkeley. So it's people, process, policies, and parts. Make sense, folks? Agree? So that was in large part, you know, that piece. Anything else to add? Anyone from my group would like to say something? Yeah, I think that was actually the core of it. There was actually one more P that came in, and that was position. And that was actually from Chumeng, you know, special. I think some people have gone to get parking sorted out. But basically he said, how opinion should we be? And that was the positioning of Singapore. We're a tiny little country, right? And we're right now at the forefront of it because we want to do that first mover, early mover, because we believe in that thing. But we're very small. So how opinionated should we be as a country and as people, right? As developers and such. So I think it's great that we have this platform, again, another P, you know, to be a part of this. I just keep going, yeah. Right, so this platform to actually work with Denise to ensure that our, you know, our thoughts, right? Our perspectives, you know, wow. Woo! Hey, without ChatGPT, okay, guys? All right. Oh, well done. See, my group, very good, well done. All right, we almost got a 9P, a 9P? No? Powerful thoughts. Fantastic. All right, so that was the first part. What needs to be in AI standards? All right, the next question. Guys, got that? All right. What are the industry's primary concerns regarding AI safety? How could these insights inform SG's AI governance policy? So, frankly, there was a lot of thought around this too, because there's a whole motion first of what could go wrong, right, in AI. So a lot of thoughts around the autonomous vehicles going amok, blah, 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 all these things that could go wrong from an AI safety perspective, trust and data and all that. So then the so what became like, what do we do about this? Oh, we talked about incentives, right? So what are incentives? So that makes sense. We should incentivize people to, ensure that we create the right sort of data. Then we went into this whole moral conversation about what's right. What do you, if you think of data that is, primary concerns regarding AI safety, you go like, okay, we got to do the right thing, have the right data, right? Then how do you figure out what's right? Is this based on some moral framework, which then will be very subjective, right? Even though you think it should be objective, but that's where it gets, very objective and subjective. So that's where we enter this circle of, okay, how do we incentivize people to, do the right thing? And we realize from a government's perspective, that's really hard because you have all sorts of different voices out there. And if the government were to dictate a certain path of what is right, that's also wrong, right? So, wow, we got really philosophical here. But here's the thing. We talked about education as perhaps a way out, as a so what, right? So educating the users to demand for better quality of data, because there's a whole concern about people actually creators don't intentionally want to make bad data and do bad product and write bad code. They just are in a rush, maybe, right? They're trying to get, and folks here were talking about profit maximization. We want to get the vehicle out very quickly, so we didn't get a chance to test it out properly, right? We as creators kind of feel bad about it. We just didn't have time to run through the whole process. But because we had to push it out, we had to get it. So, okay, wouldn't that be a right way? What would the right incentives be to ensure that we do the right thing? Well, we get users to demand quality, right? Just as we did in the organic farming side. We educate users to understand what quality could be. So I think a good point from Ari, he talked about education of users. And then another gentleman, Evan, who's out parking, brought on the point that perhaps we should also talk about educating the creators and providing the right certifications to ensure that they have the right tools and processes and know what's the right process to do. Like, how do you train an LLM model properly so you're not injecting data from like deepfake sources or something like that, right? You're using the right tools, because at the core, if something's so embedded, then you literally have some kind of zero-day thing. It's like right at the core, you're using the wrong data and you're building on the wrong thing. So how do you train users to do the right thing as well? So that comes with educating that. Make sense, guys? So that
next we'll get Denise to share with us what your team discussed.
Okay, my summary is shorter. Just gonna pull together from both groups, and I think we had really good discussions. I would say maybe more conversation on the question A, which is actually what would you like to see from the government? And the second question is a lot more specific on the pilots on AI assurance and testing and how that should be designed. I think across both groups, there was a lot of conversation about the importance of having internationally standardized benchmarks, frameworks, taxonomy, risks. I think that came across loud and clear, that this is an area that fragmentation is now what's happening, and is difficult, right? There's a lot of self-referencing, people benchmarking against themselves and their previous models, and just call out some of the work that Stanford has done in this area, for example, and that maybe as government, as ACs. Someone asked me what is AC. I have to say it's AI Safety Institute. I had assumed that the acronym was, it's an acronym from this week.
No, from the last maybe 2 months. Yeah.
2 months, okay. The 2-month-old acronym AC is AI Safety Institute. The Canadians call themselves KC, Canadian AI Safety Institute.
I don't know whether we should be sassy.
Sassy. Only Singaporean gets the joke, right? Sassy. But okay, anyway, so the ACs are also a part of the effort to internationalize and to create some conversations around standardization. There was another strong theme also about disclosure and transparency. So across the two groups, there was a lot of idea that along the AI sort of stakeholder and life cycle, from the developers to the deployers, application providers, everyone in between providing various specialized services, there needs to be a very clear sense of what you've trained on, how you train, what mitigations. We did have some conversations around how specific that should be. Idea of model cards came up a few times. So I think I think we take that to heart. We do want a transparency-centered approach, and that may be one of the few areas that we start sort of really drawing out guidance. And that leads me to my third one, which is a lot of conversation about providing more guidance and guardrails and what the government cares about, almost like stronger, clearer policy. We did talk about turnkey solutions a little bit, because I think the flip side is to make sure that this is not too expensive and onerous and creates too much friction. So at the level of, if it's too general, then that can actually create disincentives for people to do safety, because what does it mean? And there was also a broad conversation which I thought was quite interesting about focusing on applications and actual use on the ground, and then building solutions from that lens rather than other maybe ACs who are looking at it very much as foundation models, testing the model only. I thought there was a good sense that testing applications, safety mitigations for applications, and in context-specific scenarios was good, like in healthcare, for example. What does it mean to test? There was a very humbling conversation from me around people not knowing what Singapore is doing actually on the ground in the Bay Area. A lot of good work, but doing good work is not enough. There's no AC LinkedIn page. There's no AC website. People don't know. And also a question about too many brands, AI Singapore, IMDA, AI Verify, what do they all mean? And I mean, I was glad to be here to explain it, but I can't be explaining it to everyone all the time. So really maybe, and as a function of, I think, also our journey over the last year, and now being able to kind of consolidate some of that to explain that the foundation really looks more at open source and companies. AC really looks more at research plus the science of AI safety, and IMDA obviously being the government and the regulation, right? So that's our explanation, and then understand more social media presence, more media presence. On the second question of assurance, I think people felt that actually where the government can really come in to say what, again back to the disclosure point, what kind of information should be shared in order to create an assurance ecosystem, because a part of assurance is having enough information to understand whether something is safe or not. So there was that, and also the idea that assurance has to be low cost and low friction, and that ACs and governments are testing some things, third-party commercial testers are testing other things. I think there was a broad agreement on that. Okay, that's all I got on the policy. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise, for a very interesting summary. I think next we'll hear from the technical groups. I think maybe we'll start off with Mark to share what your groups discussed.
Do you want me to stand or sit?
Stand.
Okay, so first question was, what are the techniques and tools that are important for AI safety? Two things I got. One was PII, private, personally identifiable information leakage. And we like to have tools both on the input side, meaning when you are training your models, how to filter that out from being ingested and used, and on the output side. So after you've processed everything and as people are using it, how to stop that if it actually made it through the first phase from exposing all that to the end users. So there's startups people mentioned that are into that. And I think the way I see it is that we want to have a rich environment as developed as the Gen AI side or the autonomous vehicle AI side in these AI check tools to check that. So it's like using AI to check AI, right? To develop these tools to prevent, AI assisted tools to prevent these PII leakages from happening. Related to that, there's also this thing about AI assisted reinforcement learning. So right now it's very time consuming with humans in the loop. And there's this talk of having AI being an assistant. So it's more like AI assisted reinforcement learning. Now, the concern, of course, is that with less control, you might have extreme cases of bias that are going unfettered And I think it kind of segues a little bit into where governments and regulatory boards can come in giving this that safety model. So on the second point, which I'm going to talk about, let me kind of get to that gap first, because I thought it was a great point. What is the gap and risk that private sector is unlikely to address that the government should work on? The big theme on both teams was the societal impact, and they did like IMDA bringing that up as one of the like pillars, that there are these kinds of externalities that profit-minded companies chasing the product won't be at all incentivized to worry about those side effects on various members of society from young to old. And there's also the environmental impact as well as the, so how to address this? There was a thought that the government can actually make like a market, meaning like with programs offering bounties for finding such issues, such that now there is I guess for companies and private enterprise that, again, a profit-minded way to just like with the first point, as you're developing the tools, you want to develop the checks in synchronization in as robust of a way. So there's also another thought was the governments can provide a clear mechanism for the population to basically make complaints. Like, I'm being assessed by AI for my job, right? Or my fit for the job, or my credit or whatever. And I think it's using the wrong information, or I think it's giving the wrong decisions. How can I make a complaint? Is there one mechanism? And of course, we discussed that bots and others could scam and exploit this. So how do we avoid this mechanism from overwhelmed, such that it becomes, I mean, we want it to be relevant, that people trust that as well. So basically a mechanism, government can work on the mechanisms for people to flag when AI is making mistakes, because we all see these externalities that companies are getting and the bounty. Then finally, I think the same point we all echo is education. From young to old, knowing what AI is used for, where AI can be used, that's a part that the government, I think people said would play in. So stepping back to question number 2, it was more open-ended. What are the tech trends of interest and concerns to industry? And one thing that we heard was 2 things, agents and power. So agents, agentic, the thing that this trend now is AI sort of like having control of your desktop, your screen. Think of it as beyond even a co-pilot or an assistant, but like maybe a not so competent member of your team coming in to do things, whether in your corporate or in your personal setting. That is that trend. The next trend people worry about is power, which is going to keep going up, power consumption for the data centers, all that computation processing. And there's this sense that we're just throwing lots of money investing into data centers, and a crash is coming, because we're going to find out that it's unsustainable, and we've actually couldn't figure out what the monetary incentive is to keep putting money into that. So we asked, like, well, is this crash? The first thought is the crash is inevitable, because like all new industries, whether .com or before, there is that inevitability, but no one knows when. And if all knew, then we would have easily directed policy. I think kind of related to that, there was a thought that the governments have to be really kind of synchronized with industry developments. Maybe even like, we looked at, like, for example, an example given was like the EU was focused on, on a slightly different topic on charging standards for consumer electronics, having USB Type-C as more or less mandated, but that's a private standard, really. So are there private standards for AI, whether it's AI safety or tools that the governments can find the right mix and more or less regulate, so you get that balance? So that's partly what the governments can work on. Yep, I think that was really exciting discussion. I hope I captured most of your discussions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Last but not least, we'll have Wan Sie, who's standing between us and lunch. So
Yes,
over to you.
Thanks for that. Gives me reason to not say too much. Yeah, okay. So first, shout out to my 2 groups for their contribution. Thank you very much. It was very useful to hear, well, to first meet all of you as well as to hear from all of you. So there are 2 questions that we discussed. The first one was, how do we get more adoption of our tools that IMDA has put out or Singapore has put out? The second one was, how can we get more people to contribute and to participate, right? To the first question, I think the resounding kind of feedback was we should get the word out. I think to Denise's point earlier, nobody knows what we're doing. They don't think about us. So no matter how well you do, you really need to get the word out, right? So there were a few suggestions Twitter came out quite a few times. We still call it Twitter, but anyway, yeah. That it's a good platform to share. The other one is go to like places like where people are, developers are, like New Rips and so on, and they have a booth, so that you could sort of get people to understand and to use these tools. Trade publications as well, because it's not just about the researchers or academics, but it's also about businesses. So you might want to reach out to trade publications as a way to get people interested. But also quite important is to make sure that these tools are relevant, right? Not just to government, but also relevant to companies. And what does that look like? It means, number one, making sure you can explain to them why this is useful to you, right? What's the ROI? Two, making sure that it is not just about big frontier models, because there's only like a handful of companies dealing with them, but rather, what businesses really need. And that means, it's app testing, to your point again, end-to-end, not just testing of models. Making sure that we address specific use cases in sectors, whether it's in financial services, law, and so on. So there are other things that we can think about to make sure these tools are relevant. So some suggestions about how do we try and make it useful, not just to companies, but also to individuals. So potentially, if they're using it, they should try and attribute it so that we get the word out again. So that's how to get more adoption. Then how to contribute. So thanks everyone for answering my question about how you like to be involved. So a few people say we'll help to share in their work. They deal with clients, they deal with people who are less familiar with what Singapore's doing, so they can share this information. Two is they can also share the feedback from their clients, in terms of what they need and what they're looking for, right? So that's really useful. Three, thank you again for offering to contribute to the technical work, whether it's in open source, in the benchmarking work, or in agent testing and so on. I think there's lots of skills out here that we could potentially tap on. And then lastly, to be part of the work that we're actually doing, like in policy development. This could be through volunteering to be part of it, or through fellowships and so on. So I think there's a lot of interest from all of you to, or at least the two groups that I spoke to be part of this effort. So thank you so much in advance. Looking forward to working with many more of you. And then finally, somebody offered to do slides, so that's very helpful. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
I think we'll get Denise to just say a few words, and then to thank our partners as well who have made this possible for us. So over to you, Denise.
As she said, I am going to, number one, thank all of you. We couldn't have done it without you. It's a Saturday. I know that you could have been doing a million other things, enjoying the wonderful weather today. First time this week, is it? But you chose to be here, connecting with us, talking to us, giving us ideas, sharing your pain points, but also sharing your dreams, aspirations, and hopes for the country, for AI safety, and for sort of building out this technology in a way that's both useful but also safe. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much, Jasmin, for your support, your partnership, and talking to us about how we conceived of this, how we want to do this. We really see it as an ongoing relationship and engagement. Is Daryl here? SGN is here.
Daryl, yes.
Daryl, it's over there.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you again. Yeah, it's actually IMDA has imposed on you quite a bit to sort of say, can we do this, can we do that? But that's really because we treat this geographical region as one of the key ones when we're talking about sort of innovation, the speed of innovation and the speed of technology. We want to continue with that long-term partnership with all of you.